the board of directors also for the Illinois Association of, don't be afraid, they don't bite. Illinois Association of Behavior Analysis as well, and we have here today John and Jen who introduced themselves, and we've been doing work on a bill leading to the licensure for behavior analysts. But there are some questions that come with the bill, and the bill's not at a point to where it's ready to present yet, but one of the goals we have is reaching out to other organizations such as IARF to try and solicit input on the development of that bill and giving folks some input on how that shapes, especially when we're looking at issues like level 2 providers and how does that shake out. And I personally think this is a potential advantage for us as an association to look at and get involved with, because I know from personal experience, the last 2 level 2 providers I worked on getting approved. This is right before John Knight retired. I had 2 individuals who had superior qualifications to the previous 2 people who had been approved by the same individual just a couple of years ago, and they were denied. And I had to go around and around. It was like pulling teeth trying to figure out why they got denied. And I got excuses such as, well, they're not enrolled in a behavior analytical program. I said, okay, no problem. We're heading that way anyways. We'll get them enrolled. How many credit hours do they need? Well, we don't have specifics on credit hours. Okay, the plan isn't good enough. All right, what's wrong with the plan? Well, you'd have to ask a board certified behavior analyst. Well, I am a board certified behavior analyst, so it looks great to me. What's wrong with it? Well, our committee didn't think it was up to snuff. Well, who's on this committee and what are their qualifications? Well, we can't share that. So what is it, some sort of weird Star Chamber situation? What's going on? I felt like I was going to have to get our Freedom of Information Act to find this sort of stuff out. But I think there's potential with a bill like this to take this out of the dark, shine some light on it with DHS, and set up very specific parameters for level 1, level 2, so it's not left up to kind of the decisions of folks who really don't understand necessarily the type of skill sets and education they're needed to provide appropriate services. So kind of with that kind of framing, I will turn it over to John and Jen.
So I guess just to kind of frame this, right now, Jen and I are the primary authors of this licensure law that we're looking at putting in place. As John mentioned, it's not in its complete format as of yet. And we feel like we have a pretty good representation. Jen's a university professor, and I'm a clinical director and a provider. And I also serve on the board of the Illinois Association for Behavior Analysis and Missouri. So sometimes I have to figure out what state I'm in and what I'm doing. But 3 years ago, we wrote this into law in Missouri. And so what I've done is I kind of gathered some data prior to coming here. In the 3 to 4 years that we've had our licensure law into effect, we've had about 80 investigations of BC ABAs and BC BAs, inappropriate practice. We had one doctoral level BCBA that was having an inappropriate relationship with the mother of one of his clients. And so the state had to step in. That's not a good thing, in case you guys, I'm sure you guys know. So we had to tell them, not a good thing. But the licensure board posts those things so all of our members can read, all the licensees. So I guess in a nutshell, what we're looking at is to take that information and to be able to present all of the obstacles that we've encountered in Missouri and then incorporate that into a licensure law in Illinois. The issue that happened in Missouri, it sounds like the same thing here that John talked about with the Star Chamber and all the secretive stuff. We had the state in Missouri introduce this bill. Behavior analysts knew nothing about it. We weren't told anything about it. We had to insert ourselves into the conversation. And so then as a result, we were able to then sit in, write the rules and regs the way that it was a best fit for us as practitioners and organizations. So I think John makes a great point. The idea would be, instead of having the state dictate that to us, which they will, we can be a part of writing that the way that we want to. And I guess the biggest thing, as John mentioned, is the level 2 therapists, that right now I think the primary difference would be that there's really not a lot of supervision that goes along with those individuals after they get certified. though it's becoming more difficult, and that the continuing education requirements and licensure requirements, certification requirements, are not there. For us, we have to sit for a test and then you're certified, and that would go into licensure. So I don't know, Jen, what other things you want to add as backdrop?
Yeah, I mean, this, 25 states currently have licensure for behavior analysts, so this is something that the whole country is moving towards. I would say the vast majority of the remaining states that don't have it are either pursuing it actively or in the process of writing their bill. So it is something that everyone is going to be moving towards, as it makes sense for all other helping professions. We have, psychologists are licensed, social workers are licensed, et cetera. So it's really important that behavior analysts become licensed then too, so we have some ability to objectively define the scope of their practice and how they're to be governed, and also to take some of the weight and responsibility of governing that practice, especially when there are infractions, malfeasance, disciplinary things that are going on, so that those issues, those consequences can be governed by a board of individuals who understand what is right and wrong for our ethical guidelines, and is not going to be up to the administrative level of larger organizations, since that's largely probably outside of Bristol.
And some of the things too that I think that we're interested in partnering with this organization. I'm an active member of IARF in Missouri, and we found that the Missouri bill would not have been successful without having that organization in the lobbying efforts and things that took place. So there, as we were crafting this bill, what we started to do is to have bi-weekly or monthly meetings with interested individuals. And these were pretty much chaired by an attorney that actually helped us to craft the bill and to represent, I think, the concerns of the organizations that are involved. Because as we look at it, we're behavior analysts, and, in terms of, I'm an adjunct professor and Jen's a professor, and so we typically look at a lot of the ethical issues, but I'm also the clinical director for an organization that has certain fiscal responsibilities. So we have to look at things from that aspect of, well, what's going to hurt and what's going to help organizations. So that's what we want to do. We want to be able to give you that option. If you're interested in being able to be a part of the process or have pertinent questions, please email John. He's got our email addresses, and we can kind of go from there and then look at it, because we feel like we have a pretty good handle on what some of the major concerns are from an organizational perspective. It's like, okay, well, things are going pretty well now. We get this many hours and this reimbursement rate. Don't rock the boat. Let's don't disqualify some of these folks. But we want to be able to give an opportunity to be able to keep those individuals with certain parameters, like we mentioned earlier, before the state says you have to do it this way, and that it will happen that way. It's how it happened in Missouri. They moved so fast in the dark of night sometimes. It's best that these things are done with collaborative effort. So, in a nutshell.
Great, well, thank you. So, anyone who is interested in assisting, contact John.
Assisting, questions, comments, any contributions to especially the specific verbiage around level 2s and how they are going to fit into this licensure bill, so that you can continue to provide your consumers with quality services, and we can continue to ensure that the field and your consumers are protected.
All right, great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
What's the timeline arc you're on with this? I know that there's been legislation proposed before, last year, the year before. What are you?
The current bill that's proposed is currently dead, and Senator John Connolly is the one that's representing this. So in conversations with his office, we're looking at December, January to reintroduce. The veto session is coming up next, and I felt like that would be a shot in the dark, and probably something in January, February would have a better chance. But again, we're looking for critical mass and momentum behind it. And so that's what we're looking to hopefully gain here. All right, thanks for having us.
Thanks. Okay, Josh is gonna let us know what we have to work in this committee meeting today, by the way, guys. We're not going to just have some reports, and we're gonna actually make you guys work and think and give some feedback. So Josh is gonna jump in and get us started.
Okay. I'm not used to being up here, so it's kind of nice to see your faces. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. And first of all, thank you to all members of this committee that took the time to fill out the 2017 Policy Agenda and Issue Tracker Survey. The background on this is we approach policy development with some nuances in any given year to make sure that we believe that we're best representing and working towards the outcomes that you and the board want us to work towards. As you're well aware, there is no shortage of issues that either come up on a daily, monthly, or yearly basis, in addition to those overarching issues that we know that are important to each of you. As an association that has obligated itself for very good reason to handle individual member issues if and when you contact us about them, but also to work towards those issues that impact providers as a whole, you can understand that at times that can become difficult to do them all. So we have to prioritize in some way. And some organizations do 3 to 5 year strategic plans. Groups are getting away from that. Some apparently at one point did 10 to 12 year ones. I can't imagine how that works. But what we're trying to do by this process, by starting with the survey that we sent out, to the conversations that are going to happen today, to the staff retreat. I don't know if we can technically call it a staff one with Roxy, and I guess to a coffee conversation with Janet and Emily and Maggie and I will be having in September. From this conversation, we're trying to get to a point to where we have a list of priorities and measurable outcomes for the board to consider at the October meeting at the conference, and recommended strategies from the association staff about how to pursue that, so they can have good conversation then, so that when we arrive at the board retreat in December, in the annual meeting in December, we have a very good idea of what the expectations for the association are, both as staff working on those issues and you guys on a major assist from the advocacy standpoint going into 2017. That's really what this is all about. What I would characterize the conversation today is just that. Having discussion amongst yourselves about what are achievable outcomes that would put our organization in a good place to provide quality care by December 31st of 2017. And it's hard to imagine covering all these things in this conversation, but this is a good group to have that conversation about, because we won't say that we know necessarily what those strategies and outcomes are. We have a pretty good idea about some of them because they haven't changed over time. But that is the essence of the conversation. What we've laid out in the sheet that you've been given, but also in the agenda that was sent out yesterday, is we've given back to you what we saw from the survey in terms of what you as organizations identified as important, neutral, not important, or doesn't impact my agency. Some of those we backed out, particularly the ones that weren't important to your agency. And what we provided you here is, as you'll see, I can't do basic math, so I don't know if that's a dozen or more. I guess I could count it. I'd have to use my hands. Hey, I work on the budget. Of items, and what we did, there's a line there. What we did for purposes of that line is, when we saw a priority that garnered what we estimated was a majority of organizations or individuals dictating that was important, we set that above the line at 60%. Anything below the line, we put below the line because that was less than 60 or less than 50%. Why did we do that? Because this is a natural progression we're hoping, where we can narrow the scope of responsibilities and outcomes that we're working towards at the association, which means inevitably some things have to be decided are not going to be where we're going to invest resources for the coming year. Now, here's what I would say, because every survey methodology has a little bit of flaws. We understand that some of the items both above and below are important to some because of what you do and not important to some because of what you do. And so if you see something below the line on that list that you know, doggone it, this is important to me, and I know it's important. Hello, Mr. Stouter. Nice to see you, Jeff Stouter, Director of Services. Thank you for coming.
I couldn't abandon my wife on picture day.
We all have priorities. We all have priorities. So if there is an item below the line that you know you believe is important to your organization and others, I think we need to give a little bit of time to make that case. So what's going to happen is we're going to discuss these priorities. We're going to start at the top and work our way down. We're going to ask you guys to try to come to some consensus about what do you believe is a specific measurable outcome or achievement that the association could achieve for each of these priorities that are above the line. Once we've identified, now that I think about it, I wish I would have learned my erase marker, but no one can read my handwriting. Once we've arrived at what those measurable outcomes are, we're going to ask you to throw some rankings behind that. What's the number one priority, the number two? And if we go all the way to 10 priorities, so be it. That will provide staff internally what we need to see from each of you, from the ground membership at large up, to go into our staff retreat to begin to throw some strategies around these outcomes that we recommend to the board. Did I capture that as we?
I think so. Okay. So Josh, starting from the top is what I.
Can I, before you go on, can I just ask a question? I didn't get a chance to complete the survey, but so one of the things that's not on this list that's a concern of mine is a rewrite of the DD waiver. Is that subsumed under one of these? Or if not, I apologize for not responding, but that seems to me to be a pretty big ticket item.
So one of the things, we had about a 2.5 hour meeting on Monday about the survey where we talked through a number of items, both things that, if we had a chance to do it again, we would have included, things we would have worded differently, et cetera, as you might imagine. And one of the things that also came across in that conversation is how much overlap you could see between a number of these priorities. For example, you see rate increases, DSP wages, 53RD. You could characterize those as what they really are, which are workforce issues, and how do you address them. So I would say, as a roundabout way of answering your question, that it is an absolute priority that we're involved in the rewrite or the modification or what you'll have it of the adult DD waiver, especially because everything in that waiver in terms of this is the scope of services, while it doesn't get into rates, but this is the scope of services, this is what the state's gonna basically pay for you to do. I would say it's something that each of these are a part of.
Josh, where would you, obviously the WIOA thing was not on our radar when the survey came out. But that probably needs to be on there somewhere.
Yes. Well, yeah, that was one of the, so there was a few items that were added after the survey came up, both from the narrative and then also from just staff considerations of something that we thought needed going. So one of the things that was brought up by and large, or by a lot of people in the narrative portion, was that DOL bulletin. And then also, which kind of gets to what Art was talking about, is there's been a work group that's been working on, brought before this committee multiple times, on redefining employment-related services under the waiver at DD. And we know that that information is going to be used to inform their rewrite of the DD waiver. So that's another one of those specific issues that was added afterwards and is going to be part of the discussion of what's going to be a priority for us.
Cyrus, does that also include the innovative and flexible pay services?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Also, I'm wondering about, and maybe it plugs or finds its way into one of these others, is the Life Choices Initiative and just the impact of the revamping independent service coordination, what that means for families, individuals, and the providers, because I think it's not very well defined and it's definitely not funded.
Was Life Choices on, I filled out the survey, I feel like Life Choices was one of those areas, not one of them. Okay.
Some completely incapable individual forwarded this list over from an Excel spreadsheet. I won't point into any fingers or mention any names, but he may have inadvertently left off what was a very highly rated thing. So Life Choices, yes, is on the list. Okay. I'm just going to make guys it was me in case you could.
Well done. Okay, so are there any other areas that you feel was like an omission that you're wondering why it wasn't on the survey?
How about the 14C?
What's that?
The 14C.
Isn't that part of WIOA?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, Plymouth first and, okay. All right. Well, and I think that one of the things that we probably will want to just have, talk about briefly is that, many of these topics have different tentacles that go out. So like in my mind, employment first was WIOA and
Right.
So I think we probably need to make sure that we, all have a common understanding of what we're talking about, even when we're talking about these topics. That would
Almost
be,
like broader categories.
Yeah, there's almost some
where to
category.
define them, because some of these things, as you said earlier, really do
They
fall into
touch
that
each
same
other.
general area.
So the number one item on the agenda that 91% of respondents, which I'm thinking, who are the 9% that think we're paying? I'm just not going to call anybody out. It's okay. But anyway, so with the rate increases, from what I understand from what Josh has shared, is that they're looking for something that would be, what would be an outcome? What do you want them to strive towards doing? I think we can't just pound the drum and say, give us more money, give us more money, give us more money. What specifically do we think would be a positive outcome to have happen by December 31st? Is that correct? 2017. So can we open it up for some recommendations on that front?
Well, I think that the rate increases is very important, but include as administrative cost of those increases. So whatever we do, if that does come about, we have to include them. They need to know that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is an outcome or whatever, but I think that the strategy maybe is that we need to use the HCBS guidance and changes that they want in putting services in the community to justify, to put the pressure on them that you cannot expect us to implement all these wonderful things that you say we have to do without having the rates look good.
Yeah, definitely.
I think to piggyback on that, I would also consider a recommendation about day program rates for individuals that have a religious award that to balance that those existing needs happen in any environment and support is needed to, especially as it's going more toward the community.
I think also transportation rates, because those are going to increase significantly.
There are so many areas, items in the rate that I think is, it's all underfunded, whether it's, transportation or nursing, over, administration. So I guess, do we want the team here to focus on kind of an overall increase, or are there particular areas within the rate itself that we want time spent, to advocate and perhaps focus, legislatively or whatever it might take to get it done?
To add further to that, so if you're a believer that there will be a grand bargain at some point after the election where they will address revenues and expenditures, and it's going to happen eventually. Even with that grand bargain, we will not possibly be in a position to get everything that we want. So what would you want to make sure could potentially be addressed then, and at some point through further negotiation on a budget or on policy or on a waiver, for example, through the end of next year?
And it seems like, and maybe Josh, you have some thoughts about this, that the way that we would have the most opportunity for success is tackling certain parts of the rate rather than just a broad rate increase. But if we get the DSP wage and if we're able to tackle transportation with day for nursing, is that better than just saying we just need a big old rate increase?
And I would think we need to allow flexibility, so as opportunities come up over this next year, hopefully I'm optimistic, but that we can move in directions that are flexible so that we can get the most out of this. So the big outcome is maybe increasing rates, but then there are other priorities under there to spend time.
There's so much there that needs money. I think we should really zero on the DSP rate. Zero next, we had all the information, the push, and everything else, and put everything there. And then we need to look at what's the second thing that we can get that doesn't cost money.
Or does, or doesn't cost money.
Just to say that it seems like it would make sense for us to get a good understanding of what our costs are across the state of our programs and major program areas, including the drivers that create variation in Southern Illinois versus,
But that's becoming almost an impossible task. I mean, we've done so many cost studies over the years, with and without the state. But I think that our industry is currently in a situation in which we no longer really understand what our costs are because we can't fill staff vacancies. We can't give a decent health insurance program anymore. We don't know what those costs are now.
I don't think we can lose the momentum that we build up with the DSP wage bill. I mean, that's got to be the top priority. And I think maybe the message is if you want to accomplish all these things, flexible day service, life choice, employment first, the workforce has to be a component of that. So that's your outcome. If you want to achieve those things, you got to be able to focus on
It gets complex. We include everything else that gets complex. We really have to focus on the three skills.
Well, and the DSP wage bill includes DSPs, nurses, Qs, and frontline supervisors.
Right.
I think a big part has to be other associated costs. I brought it up a couple meetings back. In our place, we've looked at if we move from, say, $10 an hour, $15, our $10 people who are now on Medicaid will come back to us to be on our health insurance plan. Our health insurance plan will cost us $4 an hour per person just to cover the health insurance. It'll be about $8,000 for a course of a year. Multiply that
I'll
over.
take the increase. I'll take your increase.
Well, it's going to be higher than that. That's for the cheap plans. And I'm going with the idea of state employees can have good health plans. Our employees can have good health plans. We watch for ourselves. We got more in the residential. Our turnover rate for staff has gone from 5 to 7% per year if we stay in our day program workshop setup. Residential, it's 75%. People come in and find a job somewhere else and they're gone in a flash. Or having to go through 500 applications to find 15, 20 people good enough to look at.
I have a question about the rates. I mean, I agree about the focusing on the PSP rate and so forth, but because we're also in the state of flux where seemingly in 3 years everything's gonna be different anyway, would over the next 3 years our priority in terms of rates being making sure that whatever changes occur, that we're adequately funded for those for whatever the new reality is, as opposed to putting so much effort into what a reality is for the next year or two. Aside from the DSP rate, I mean, that's significant, but everything else, I think it'd be more important to prioritize our efforts toward, and it may not be in 17, but certainly over the next 3 years, making sure that, whatever employment first comes out to be and so forth, that we're focusing on adequate funding for that new program, which would include transportation and all the other issues.
So one example of that might be dovetailing this with the work of the Vision Quest project that has recently happened, that has analyzed day program rates and is making suggestions for rates moving forward, right, Cyrus?
Yep.
In terms of
That's supposed to be
day
cost
employment.
neutral, but.
Well, I think our position would be
So-
it's not cost neutral, and this is what we need to do.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest points that the association, the other trades and members involved in that group wanted to make, talking specifically about the employment meetings, was we cannot accept a rate methodology that assumes a wage component of less than $15 an hour. And furthermore, given that a lot of the jobs we're talking about are not entry-level DSPs, we're wanting to go above and beyond $15 an hour. So yes, we have made it clear that we need to talk about investment. Unfortunately, transportation has been taken off the table purposefully for now. But to get to your answer, yes, we made it clear that there needs to be an investment of resources in this, and that's kind of what we're going on record and saying by saying we only support 15 or more than $15 an hour. But the subject matter expert with Vision Quest has been told, as I'm sure they all have, that anything that you propose needs to be budget neutral.
So how many of you guys hire consultants to come into your organizations and tell them what their outcome is gonna be? Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
So I'm just, Gail.
One of the things I was speaking with Janet yesterday, how do you measure outcomes in some of these things we're talking about? So I'm hearing a consensus that $15 an hour is our high thing, and we may know in the next few days whether that's successful or not. So measuring just that, I think one of the biggest successes IARF has had this year is taking Lead Employment's coalition of other groups together to get to where we have on the $15 an hour thing. And so I think a measurable outcome is putting a lot of our efforts into making sure that group continues to stay together and having that as a priority of all the organizations together, because I don't think we got near as far as we have, or we'll continue to go forward on this issue, whether it's $15 an hour or rate changes or whatever, if we don't keep those groups working at least toward the same path. So you don't control that, but I think from our part, trying to keep those people on the same page, working together toward that goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cyrus, the other thing about cost neutral, I don't know how broad the area the consultant's working in, but yes, cost neutral in total for HFS and DHS, but not for our area because we're so starved for resources.
Okay. So it sounds like, the first two, the rate increases and the DSP mean, those really go, $15 an hour is our goal, continues to be our goal. That's the outcome that we wish to achieve.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I had a question, but I don't want to get so far ahead of the conversation.
Go ahead.
This discussion about rates, does the committee or folks want to talk yes or no about whether or not that is involved with the HCBS transition plan? Are they wedded or are they separate? Implementation of a hypothetically approved Illinois transition plan.
I don't think they can be separate.
Yeah.
When you talked about actual funding for whatever the new reality is, that's what you're seeing.
I agree with that. We have to look at, because we have many people in our SOAR programs that are already gone. Many who came from institutions, ICFDDs, and things of that nature. We're going to have to look at in the future, which is the home-based program. And we have to make sure that is written and funded to be able to take care of those individuals who are at home now or who don't want to go into a 4-bed, 6-bed, whatever bed facility there is. I think there's a lot of people who are within the system who are leaving the system because they're going to pass away.
Josh, your point is an interesting one, but the reality is that right now they may be separate, because if we don't do something quickly, we won't get to 2019.
I think it's a piece of the puzzle. It's just, we need to have it now if we want to have any attempt.
Yeah, but you also said that one of the frustrations you have is you're not able to quantify your costs right now because the system is so broken. But perhaps moving to compliance with the HCBS rule, that is your justification, something you can cost out, and something you can use as a lever for you to get more resources.
I think you have to cost out the plan. The problem is there's no plan. I don't know how soon that's gonna be.
We have a plan that plans to plan.
Well, no, I know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a concern because you have a way to go. If there's a plan, then you could do some costing out of that plan so that everyone's forced to look at the reality of you either come up with this or you lose Medicaid dollars. I don't know. In 2019, something happened. But it's hard to do it without a plan. And do we know?
Well, even that is indicative and it tells a story. If say you bring in somebody, cost out this plan like Massachusetts did, and the expert consultant is like, there's no conceivable way to cost out this transition plan, is indicative of whether or not there's a quality plan.
Sure.
Doesn't the tying in of the HCBS, which I agree, certainly ideologically it ties in, kind of to Dale's point, like if we are a coalition and we need to increase our rates and it's just to correct it, just get us to some equilibrium with respect to, recruitment and retention, doesn't that kind of muddy that a little bit?
Well, it's a little scary to work real hard on a rate increase not tied to the new plan, because, I can hear it already. We just gave you this, make it work. Do you know what I'm saying? Where it might not even be anywhere. I mean, I just think you have to be very bad.
The DSP rate increases.
Okay. So Josh, Cyrus, I think that we've talked to the first two, and I think plan implementation, when we don't know that there's a plan, what's an outcome there? I don't know. So, I think that, I know for myself, when I filled out the survey, I'm sure I rated this one as something that was concerning to me, and probably more concerning to me on the level of I don't know what the plan is versus concerns about the plan, because I don't know what the plan is. I mean, is that sort of where everybody is at with that? So is there something that IARF needs to have as an outcome or a target with this particular area, or is it something that stays on their radar screen at a very high level and sort of is embedded throughout many other discussions and many other items. I don't know, I'm asking the question to see.
One of the things I think we could do now, to reinforce that, is to put together I'll just make it a 20-point paper that we submitted to EHSA, our interpretation and understanding of the plan. Our position is this. What is your response to that? Just flesh them out.
Well, and I think, you know, and I don't know if this is something that we would be as bold as to say it, but maybe we would. I mean, I frankly, you know, have concerns about the quality of assessments that's going on around the state with bulk right now. We have some locations that are, you know, one particular location is very high on my priority list of whether or not that's going to cut the mustard moving forward. And it's a location that they did not even enter or take a look at. And, you know, they went to a couple of SILAs and said, great. And they went to a CLF that we still have, where people are pretty independent and use our community a lot. And they said, fabulous, we should do more of these.
I'd like to say, I have one person on duty for 6 clients tonight. Do you think CMS will approve that? That'll be a satisfaction. I mean, I would, that's what I would do. I'd put them against the wall now to flesh them out, because all they're hoping is that they will say we're doing a great job. They don't have to spend any money.
That's my fear.
Right. Well, you can almost tell from the informational bulletin, they pull out just isolated things, like the health services, and think that they're making a big stride toward being in compliance. And health services aren't even paid by the home base. It's a totally different kind of money.
Right.
You know, they don't, we have to do something to get them more on track with what even the interpretation of the waiver is. Because to me, out of all the things I think they have to deal with, that would not have been on my radar if we're jumping right on and disrupting your system. You know, they just seem so disconnected, and you've got people who apparently are writing this plan who maybe don't have any idea about how services are delivered.
Exactly.
And if we don't fix that, we won't be here tonight.
And Carl, and then Carl, yeah, Michael, no, go ahead.
I think that right after this election, they're gonna start throwing out closing institutions.
I agree.
And I think we have to be proactive in this, saying we cannot support it unless we get a pretty high percentage of the savings. And we gotta do that through the coalition as well. That to me is, they always wanna know where the money's gonna come from. I got a place. There's a lot of money over there. And that should be really up there, because you know it's gonna come down and come down fast. If they want community support, we have to say no, because they're gonna get us sick.
I think that's a strategy towards achieving an outcome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's one among strategies towards achieving an outcome.
Okay. I was just saying on the, I think an outcome of HBS transition plan implementation, that would be the IARF really pushing for that transparency and collaboration of the state agencies. So that we know what they're doing, because I think that's what we keep getting this. I heard it twice this morning, they think without, or they act without thinking. I think that's what we want to stop, or as an agency, we should stop that action. That they actually come to us first when they're thinking, and then maybe they can implement something a little better.
The DD scoop isn't enough.
Really?
So you're positing that a measure of success, because to date, we've been informing members, this is, first of all, the original plan was written by another administration. The new administration came in, there was a lag. The same people that wrote it are gone, with the, at least on the HFS side. So now you have a plan that is still up for approval and discussion at CMS, which we expect, we're starting to now tell states, you know, it's happening slowly, but it's picked up its pace. I think we heard Ohio got verbal approval, and we're expecting to see that on paper soon. So it's going to happen eventually. So a measurable outcome of success in that space of a priority is to ask and ensure that there's transparency and collaboration.
So they're sitting down with us.
How do we know when that's happening?
It's not, it's a notification.
Measurable.
Comes out.
Just for students of fluid work. So has anybody seen our plan? So what I looked at just seems to be the site responses that HSN put together and said, you know, it's this, it's that, or that. But I don't recall reading any narrative that addressed any of the issues that we're raising. So when we say we have a plan, and I don't think I've ever seen the plan.
I mean, I know when I looked at it, it certainly didn't feel like a plan. So.
But are they telling us that is their plan?
That is what they filed with federal CMS as their transition plan, is what you've all seen and commenting on right now.
Which then leads me to think that there is no way that that plan is going to be approved.
Right.
So I mean, I think, you know.
Maybe an objective is getting them to read a plan of a Ford that actually went through, and they should realize right away, there's most of the components aren't in their plan. I mean, you're really, it's shocking. The Ford that went through are very systematic, and Illinois is just not even, they didn't hit any of them, you know. But until they realize that, they're not going to change. I don't know. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
I'd like to drift back to Carl's thing about that the election is coming. I got a situation right now where we got a guy in our program who had lots of seizures that over time came under control. His behavior skyrocketed. Trouble we're running into, he's beyond the capacity from the services in our county, at the hospital, at the ER, the behavioral health unit, psychiatrists, and physicians to get the medication for this guy. Our local emergency room says, please don't bring him back anymore, because all they do is load up with Haldol just to calm him down. They have security guards. We've got 2-on-1 supervision 24 hours a day. The behavior analyst came through, says it's 4-on-1. And this came from an okay guy who's now real serious problems. See a psychiatrist? December 15th, maybe. In the meantime, local physicians will not give psychiatric meds before going to see a psychiatrist. So you want to bring these people out in the community, where's the system going to keep them there? As I brought up earlier, we're blowing through staff. They're tired of getting beat up by this guy. And in the case of where do I go? And he goes, yeah. I talked to the SST team. They're booked with these people all over the state doing the exact same stuff now before we get into more people out of state institutions. If I go back to the local DD network, yeah, the idea is, well, get a second opinion as a VNS to see maybe there's a problem there. Okay, who can I go to? I don't know. Google. Here's 25 docs from 250 miles within 10 minutes. But the support system to go get the help is not there. Yeah, create everything. I wish there was this place in our town. If our emergency room can't handle them, the police don't want to come to our place anymore, 911 doesn't want to deal with them, where the hell do I go with these people? I'll give you an easy one compared to some people who will be coming along.
So because we have to move through a number of items in the next 45 minutes, I want to try to narrow this a bit further, because just listening to our colleagues in other states, this transition plan is the biggest linchpin for all of the issues that we're talking about, both in the immediate and the next 3 to 5 years. So a recommendation was for the state to be transparent and collaborative with implementation of the transition plan. That led to comments from the group that the plan is really a plan to plan and there's no substance behind it. So between today and this time next year, Illinois will have a plan. I believe that. It may look different from where it is now. So let's accept the fact that right now the plan is just a plan, but that the committee has ranked this as a high priority. What should we be doing in the time we have now to identify, what would you consider as a measurable outcome in terms of us doing work on this HCBS transition plan that is not a plan?
This may be a horrible idea.
Up to them.
But, you know, do we take the step of kind of providing that assessment to the state of where we think that we are? You know, sort of, you know, you're coming back over here with Bulk and saying we're fabulous. We don't think that we are. And I think it kind of ties to what Art had said. Is it acceptable? You know, we'll see. Do you see CMS approving this, and this? This is what we think that we need to do to be in compliance. So do we sort of set the table for them, you know, with a skeleton of a plan?
So the question is, do you give that to DHS or you take it directly to CMS?
Yeah.
Because that way, because we're all, it's all gonna run
Second
downhill.
biggest step in a hornet's nest, I don't know.
Well, but then it's all gonna run downhill, because if they send it, when DHS is not compliant, then it's all gonna be us, all the negative PR is gonna come down on us, that we're all bad, we're doing these workshop stuff, and all the negative stuff, we're gonna have to deal with it. Like you said, even your thought of providing it directly to DHS, so we say, what does the system need to be? Or you actually take that to CMS and say, hey, plan doesn't move forward, we're afraid that we're gonna be all put in this position and we're not gonna be able to meet the needs of these individuals within a compliant standard. We take a proactive approach. It does open the hornet's nest, I know that, but if we don't, we're gonna be dealing with it on the other end.
That kind of flows against the transparency and collaboration.
I mean, how's that work so far?
I know.
Maybe another way of saying that is, do we want to do the work of developing what the plan should be, you know, and perhaps involve them in those discussions, like initiate that on our own? Because to Dale's point, it is providers that are gonna be left holding the bag, no matter what, you know, no matter what culpability the division has or the department has in putting that together. So I fear waiting around for that is not going to serve us well.
Because the governor's gonna change, the leadership's gonna change, you're gonna have a new director, and all, again, it's all gonna fall directly on us.
Do we know if the waiver the renewals of the waiver, do we know, are those in good shape and moving forward? I haven't even seen it.
I think the children's waiver is in, there's like a plan of whatever the lingo is, a plan of correction.
So they think they're gonna accept that, and that's gonna.
I think so. The adult waiver expires July.
Didn't they say they wanted to have a draft in February to start that?
And that, can I just go back to that?
I'm
That's
just
why I
trying to
think
figure out.
We need to be in the room right now with that waiver. We need to look at all the service definitions and say, what I will predict the future. The waiver we submit in July will be the same one we did this year. Unless we get active and say, that's bullshit, you need to add that and that and that.
And whatever
I don't
waiver they
think we can
live
get in the
under
room to do that.
is going to have to be compliant with the HCDS rule.
Right.
Right.
I didn't hear what you said.
I was supporting your comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the outcome is that we draft a document ourselves. Say this is what we need to do. Is that what I'm hearing the outcome is? Figure it out.
Yes. Informed by the situations we see now, heading into the future. Can I ask a dangerous question? Because you did such a good job, of course. It's hard to follow with success. How much, I'm just really curious, if you look down the list below HCBS transition plan, how much, which of those items would or would not factor into that?
Yeah, probably
Yes.
is.
53 R&D.
The employment groups.
Employment first.
Home-based services.
Yeah.
But home-based, they're gonna wait to see what the children's home-based waiver, whether that gets approved, and then they're gonna try to implement what's in that in the adult. So we're in a waiting kind of.
What's the time frame on that, Susan?
It's been
There's a
severe.
clock.
I mean, they were expecting this month to have some feedback from CMS on.
So they're still on the clock with CMS to respond to what they recently.
Right.
What is the final?
I will say, I think one thing is that DDD is working on a lot of changes for the employment, support employment service definition of that group, and they have those subject matter experts in, and Reba's a part of that. The meetings that have been hosted here, so there is some work behind the scenes. I'm not just sure how much they've communicated out to the broader community, so I think there's work going on behind the scenes, so I think we need to.
And then along those lines, I think that there's work going on behind the scenes in several different groups. And I've been really involved, as many others have been, in the flexible day services group, as well as the employment task force group. And with the flexible day services group, we've sort of stopped and dug our heels in and said, we're not doing any more work here until you get the leadership from the Employment First Task Force, the Vision Quest group, and our group sitting together having some conversation, because I think that, you know, we are talking about similar things, but we can't talk about rates over here, but they want us to talk about the program model over here, but it's not connected to the rates. It's all disjointed. So, you know, it's got to get people in the same room.
Right, I think we need to get the right people from the division. How does this all fit together?
Yeah.
And what are we looking at in terms of a waiver rewrite, how it's all, both employment first, and all the other issues going on? I mean, there's no coordination.
You know, another item that we jotted down that was a priority that I think that falls within the community-based waiver is life choices as well. That all fits in to life choices. That was the one you left off. You're just throwing it, you're trying to carry that.
Now, if you thought truly that after the election that state ops will come up and they'll be serious about it, then you'll see it move real quickly. So I guess you have to be ready for that, because if that's true and the money's ever there won't be DHS people doing it. It'll be everybody else, and there'll be I mean, if that's true. Because that, I mean, then it gets real serious, and then it'll be tomorrow we need it. It won't.
I think that if we're closing the state ops, that whole crisis intervention program has to be in place.
Yes.
That situation that he described, we've all been in that, and it just can't go on.
But without an increase in salary before that, you won't be able to act quickly. You have all these vacancies now.
That's right.
Right. So you just can't do it quickly. Even if the money's there, it's gonna take us time to get people on board.
Okay, are you feeling like we can move on to the DOL overtime piece?
Well, I like the one thing is the 14C stuff, that latest memo, I'd like to really understand or have some idea of what DRS's responsibility is in all of it. You know, they're talking about determining eligibility, they're talking about transitional services. It looks like the agencies can't do it if we have 14C certificate. That's all a lot of questions that need to be answered, that memo. What the hell can we expect out of that?
So we want to jump on that one right now?
Oh, yeah.
It's on the list. Okay. So preaching to the choir, you've been put into a position where you are responsible ensuring someone is compliant with a particular set of services before they can receive subminimum wages, or you're going to receive the financial penalty, but your hands are tied because in many instances you are either not the responsible party or you're directly prohibited from providing those services.
I don't have.
That sucks. So, where do you stand? There's a few things here. First and foremost, in regards to DRS, yes, you are right to be concerned of whether or not there's capacity within the division to ensure that individuals are receiving some of those services, specifically because we've heard it directly from DRS staff that they do not feel that they have the capacity to ensure that all 14C employees throughout the state receive in-person counseling. That's one example, and there's just saying there's questions of who is going to be available to provide some of these other services like peer mentoring, self-advocacy, the ones that you're directly prohibited from doing, and DRS, there's two things coming up where they're going to be looking for some more information because they're not totally sure whether or not they are compliant because they sent out those real pay for real work brochures. So for like the information and referrals part, I know that they feel that they were compliant with that if that information is getting to the individual because they provided you, the employer, I'm not agreeing with them, but they provided you, the employer, with the mechanism to provide the information and referrals. The peer counseling, that's one that they don't know about. Also, the peer mentoring, self-advocacy, and they are having subject matter experts come out from the Department of Education sometime soon to do in-person technical training with DRS staff to answer some of the questions that they don't know, and that's, are we compliant with these portions of this WIOA mandate? How can we become compliant? And then there's also going to be a technical assistance training in Chicago hosted by the RSA I know a number of you have tried to get registered for this training. Unfortunately, because I pestered them and I was successful in getting a spot there, they have looked to the association as distributing and disseminating what we've learned at that training to all the providers. So we do have a spot at that training, and we will be there to get some more answers as well.
We'll auction that off today, by the way. He's going. Additionally, our national affiliate, Access, which has typically been one of the lead national affiliates on employment issues, is working with its membership to reach out to the RSA and the Department of Labor together to ask them for guidance on how those two agencies are communicating and how that DOL bulletin on the staff is. When are ground surveyors going to be using that bulletin in their surveys? Some more questions of how is this going to be applied? What is the expectation of a provider to do when the designated state unit is not helping them give people the services that they need before they can be employed at sub-minimum wages? And for anything that's going to cost, where's this money going to come from? So there's, I know, a great deal of anxiety, uncertainty, lack of clarity right now, but I think over the course of the next couple of months, especially next month in September with that training in Chicago, we should be learning some more. And 6 months out, when this is going to start kicking in from July 22nd, 2016, is close. You're looking into January of next year, going into February. So time is not our friend. I do know we were speaking on one of the Access calls with a surveyor or a member, a provider, and this was just 2 weeks ago, who had a survey that week, and they had to sit down with the DOL employees and show them the memo or the bulletin because they hadn't seen it and they had no idea about it. So I don't know if that's a good thing in the fact that it's not moving quickly, or a bad thing in the fact that there's obviously some disjointed communication within the Department of Labor and with RSA and Education. Because I can tell you that I don't feel like Access did. DRS, a lot of the designated state units saw the Department of Labor stepping in and bringing down the hammer like this as quickly as they did. So can't sugarcoat it. This is a tough one. And I would normally try to sugarcoat something, but I can't. Well, we are going to be doing whatever we can to learn more and provide you the guidance that you need to be compliant and provide us the tools we need to advocate for the resources to be there for individuals to become compliant.
Well, we're on the hook from July 22nd, right? On April 24.
So July 22nd is when the law went into effect. So for any current employees, which was anyone hired before July 22nd, 2016, you have until July 22nd, 2017 to ensure that they have received those utilization or pre-utilization services, whatever you want to call them. For anyone hired after July 22nd, 2016, you have within 6 months. Does that make sense?
Is there a retro back to, could we be impacted and hadn't paid back pay on July 22nd?
Yeah, so if you hire someone after July 22nd, 2016, and you're paying them sub-minimum wages without them having received those pre-utilization services, and then the DOL comes in at I would say any point and can tell that they did not receive those services between July 22nd, 2016 and 6 months out, if they were hired after that date, 6 months out, then yes, financial back penalty. And then a year after that, if they have not received those services and they were someone who was employed by your agency before July 22nd, 2016, and they have not received those services within a year, then yes, you're going to be on the hook for back penalty.
So it was 6 months to get compliance.
For people hired after a year for people, and that's only for the continuing employment of people of any age. So because there's two requirement categories: people 24 and younger, and people 25. That's for the continuing employment of just about anybody. But there's more than that needs to be done.
Yeah, Cyrus, but they can still attend a DT site, not being employed.
Yes, this only applies to receiving sub-minimum wages.
Right. Okay. Good discussion there.
I went to our local doors office and talked to the local manager about that. And she said, well, she has no idea how to do this, but she also said, we'll probably reject 90% of your people because they won't meet our basic criteria and look for a community job. So like, why go through this process at all when you're going through the spot that they're coming back to us or go nowhere?
Well,
a very small number.
Long story short, or to put this in the most simple nutshell that I can, to move this on, is this is a tough change. It's going to be very hard. People are not talking together like they should be. But this is better than what we saw as the alternative, which a lot of advocates wanted to push for, and that was the outright repeal of 14C. And what I always saw as WIOA was that word I can't even think of because you don't see it anymore in government.
Cooperation?
Cooperation, there you go. Between those two groups, and this is what we have. We have stronger utilization mandates that, they've not been there before. Doors has not been required to do this level of work before. It's going to be hard, but I hope in the end it's better than what the alternative would have been, and that would have been the outright repeal of this program within a few years. So it's about as easy as I can put it.
All right, well, we need to move on to the list, and that's an important topic, and thanks, Cyrus, for bringing everybody up to speed. The next item that I see on the list is the DOL overtime exemption rule. What is the outcome there? Make it go away? But it's not going away. So.
Did that legislation pass federally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends who you vote for.
Cyrus,
Yes, sir.
do you think that there's any intent on DRS's part to do nothing and to do as little as possible so that workshops are going? Because we need to have them do, we can't wait 2 months technically. We have a number of youth coming in to our high school transition program that we now told schools and their families they can't work, but they want to work. And we're gonna put them in vocational training and assessment for jobs and stuff until we get doors to give us the documentation, which I have no belief they will do.
So, I'm not gonna lie, there are definitely people within the Doors administration, and you know this, that would like to completely do away with 14C program. In order for them to do what you're suggesting would be in total contradiction to the law. And I think that would be extremely hard for them to justify. And I hope not. And I've got a one-on-one meeting with Chris Smith on Wednesday. And if you want me to ask that question point blank, I will.
Which Doors was that good? They have no idea.
For them, I don't know what the ramifications for them would be, but for them to act in total contradiction to the law, there would have to be some type of enforcement mechanism, loss of federal funds. I don't know exactly what that would be, but there has to be something there. They can't just blow it off.
But they can drag their feet and not
They
provide the
certainly can.
services timely, where it pretty much kills us.
Our counselors have no idea what to do when we've asked about referring individuals to them from our our DT sites. They said, well, we're not sure what to do.
And I guess my only thing when you talk with Chris is that we really can't wait 2 months for them to sign and scratch their heads and talk to everybody. Because we are under this requirement now, and we need them to put something in the next 30 days that will provide these services for new people that are coming in.
Is that a recommendation?
That's a recommendation.
Could you repeat it?
So we review what I just said. That we request of Chris Smith that they do something in the next 30 days to put these services for new people coming into sheltered employment so that providers can provide vocational and training services to the customers that present. And the big problem is going to be youth. But to me, I can't imagine they could send a counselor over to Sertoma tomorrow and meet for 15 minutes with each of these people that are new to day program or any of our agencies and get their career counseling documented. And I believe we could give them the advocacy information ourselves and document that. But the youth is the big problem because they have to open a case or they have to prove transition services or the school has to give them, and then they have to try to, for a reasonable amount of time, get them in community employment and then they have to post them and document it. And then the law says they have 45 days after that to produce the documentation.
Typically, they gave them a buffer.
So given this one has timeframes that are law or regulation, that are not respectful of what we're talking about here, I have what you put out, Dale, or Gus, looking to the end of next year, in this space of WIOA, is there another achievable outcome you would want the association to work towards?
I just want to get you, I can answer that to Cyrus. If you do have that meeting on Wednesday, and maybe this is a dumb question, but I'd ask it anyway, that is, when I read that correspondence, it wasn't obvious to me that someone like DOORS, as I think they use the term designated state unit, couldn't contract out for that function.
They can.
They
With
can.
certain entities, they can. For some of the services, they can. Not you for or 14C certificate holder, I should say. Not for some of the services, like the peer.
Can they contract out for that consultation to the person to say you want a job or not?
The in-person counseling? I don't know for certain.
So that's the one that scares me, because what I fear, when they say they're overworked, we'll find another company created in Illinois by people I don't trust who are gonna come to our shop saying, you don't really wanna do that, do you?
Yeah, but if I'm remembering correctly, I don't believe that was one of the ones that as 14C certificate holders were strictly prohibited from providing. Put my foot in my mouth, but I don't think it is. That's one of the things we need to get better answer for.
Well, maybe one of the goals that we want to do, maybe Anchor needs to look at a legal remedy right now. And they could feel free to use Illinois as a poster child. Because clearly Illinois is not ready and not able to do what the law is requiring, and the feds didn't fund it. And so there's a lot of legal remedy there.
At least get a hold on implementation until they can prove that what they're gonna do it, right? So that we can't be penalized.
Yeah, the other thing I want to throw out there at the risk of not being popular is I think we all need to understand that 14C is going away.
Okay.
And how we get there and what we do for the individuals that are currently supported in that way, I think has to be our discussion. Yes, there are these immediate things that need to be addressed, and we will address those. But longer term, it's not like we can say, if you say to us, save 14C, you're going to be asking us to do the impossible.
No, I don't think that's the request. It's that this is unreasonable implementation because we have you're talking about customers, students, youth, adults that come in for service, and we're having to tell them we can't do the things we used to do now instantly because we will have financial penalties. And we know, but we need time to change, and also that comes back into, okay, if you're gonna do this change, you have to provide rates and a system so that yours could provide their part of it if we do some of this, and the agencies could change their services and provide the services that are now going to be required.
That's where I think it rolls back up into that rates discussion too.
And we're very aware of that. In fact, we were already starting to plan our changes in the coming year, but then now this hammer got dropped on us. And we have people coming in, we're actually hiring a staff we can't afford to provide vocational training in other groups for students who thought they were gonna come in and get a paycheck. We're very disappointed. And we're gonna provide vocational and job assessment training and all kinds of other things for them so that we can continue to serve them. Instantly, I told my staff they have to do it for next week. We have new missions next week.
Hey Josh, do you have what you need in this area to move on?
We have enough to be dangerous.
It's enough to be dangerous. Awesome. Okay, so the DOL overtime exemption rule. That's another. That sort of is what it is, So, is there an outcome that we want to achieve? I think Nancy put on.
I was reading an article, maybe through Disability Scoop or something, just yesterday, that possibly the federal government will be increasing or proposing to increase the Medicaid match to help offset that cost.
Yes, there's a piece of legislation that's been proposed, right?
It's a bipartisan bill that's been proposed to provide for the chip level, I think. FMAP bump temporarily, I think it's 3 years. It's not been completely costed out yet. Would also move the waiver programs into the Medicaid access rule and eliminate some archaic language in federal statute. They're being very meticulous about who brings on. The goal is to try to get something accomplished by virtue of the package or bill movement in a lame duck session. It's a hard lift to move something like that. FMAP's always something that states talk about, but there's a little bit of movement on. But we think, based on what we're hearing from the federal level, that this is such a unique and specific situation that it's impossible to achieve full outcomes. So we're following Anchor's lead and passing down to all of you, urging you to meet with your members of Congress back in district to get them on to HR 5902. We're also asking you, we'll be speaking about this with the board, but we rarely ask you guys to make trips to DC on behalf of federal issues, particularly for your executive directors in the room. September 19th and 20th, Anchor is having a leadership summit in DC. There'll be a fly-in component of that, or a Hill Day component, where we're asking you, and they're asking you to go visit with your members of Congress and staff in DC to talk specifically about this issue. So if you've not booked your travel already, we would encourage all executive directors to provide ED services to make that a priority.
So is the outcome to pass the legislation? The P&A increase. So perhaps we could start with just reminding everyone what the legislation was this past session.
Sure, and I don't remember, Kim. No, the legislation was to, I believe it was to get to 60 and tie it to an indicator, basically, to grow it over time. That was a priority that the board outlined for us 2 years ago. We got Ben bill passed, it was in place. Recently, JCAR adopted the adopted the regulations to peel it back, which was basically covering the division's ass when they previously reduced it. We know that this makes the DHS secretary feel bad. We don't know if it makes the governor feel bad. We have a sponsor that wants to continue to work on this. I think she's been primed enough. I don't know that this has to be something we spend as much time on as we did in the past, but there was a committee hearing again this spring where this was brought up specifically. I guess the question, is, I guess this is another one of those issues or priorities that already has a pre-understood outcome associated with it. So I guess the question is that, do you expect us to continue to work on this issue?
I would like to see the legislation passed. And I think it's, one of those areas that has that, very immediate positive impact on all the men and women that get services in our, provider agencies residentially. So, I think, anyone disagree? So when you were thinking, still a continuation, when you put that on the survey, Priscilla Ligas, what were you thinking? I mean,
Well,
what was
the targeted movement that I understood from the consent decree comes to a conclusion.
Yes.
In the coming year in terms of the numbers. DHS has been ahead of the numbers, I believe, on the waiver of monitoring people off the waiting list. But it's my understanding, and I know this has meaning to attorneys, but I'm not one, but what the question is for me is the consent decree dictates that the defendant, the state, has to move people off the waiting list at a reasonable pace. And I just don't know what that means. Ligas has been a shield and a sword for us the last few years, more of a sword than a shield that's protected us. It's the basis under which you've been paid under this impasse or continue to be paid in this impasse. There's been legislation introduced by groups to try to codify, I believe, Ligas, so to speak, in the state statute. I'm just really curious what the expectations of providers in this room and the association should be with respect to what is there a future for Ligas? Does it read as something the state gets itself out of? The governor has mentioned several times that he wants to get the state out of consent decrees, which he said is since revised by saying basically you need to do the things you need to do to prevent the state from getting into further consent decrees. Looking just for a little conversation around that, because we did not take a position, I don't think, on the legislation that was introduced by Senator Fullerton, I think, in this area. I don't know what the protection, I don't know what the plaintiffs and the interveners intend to do about things moving forward as well.
That's my question. Where does it stand with, recognition of non-compliance?
Oh gosh, you would ask that. I can know by the end of the board meeting.
I think that there's another
meeting
court
coming up.
appearance in, I feel like mid-September was the last I heard, and it's just, it's a court appearance with both parties, and
I'm not aware of
That's
any
not as much as I-
plan that's been proposed by either mutually accepted or proposed by the defendants.
The lawyers have been clear, they doubt the judge is going to say pay people.
Right.
yeah, no. I think it's still, the court monitor and the attorneys say, you're out of compliance, and the state says, yeah, no, we're not, so it's.
I hope they don't give up on that, because Rhode Island's judge did dictate that the state must increase DSP wages. And I was not aware, I forwarded that on to some of the attorneys for the interveners and said, there's whatever lawyer term you would use, precedent for a judge to make that decision.
So what potential impact would IARF have on this, that those working very close, more closely with this?
What impact could IARF have on
What you mean
this?
impact?
Yeah. I mean, is the focus on, and I'm just throwing this out, the focus on reasonable pace, of defining what reasonable pace looks like? Or is the focus on the non-compliance piece of what?
Or so here's the thing, like
Or
we hear because of the wage issue, that there are group home vacancies. We know people are moving into HBS more. There is the wage issue that is impacting the ability to staff homes. So, I mean, maybe, and this is not a preconceived belief or recommendation, just for conversational purposes. If a group says, Liga shall continue in terms of moving 500 people a year off the waiting list, do we have a problem with that? We can't achieve that outcome given what we're given. So is there pushback on something like that?
I just think it's another tool to use in terms of trying to increase rates to address our workforce issues.
It's the only thing that you really have.
I mean, if somebody else saying it, then besides us.
Yeah.
Well, and Kim, to answer your question, one of the things that IARF can do is to provide the court monitor with the data that we've been collecting, for example, on the ICFDDs and civil vacancies for staff.
So I agree with that. It sounds like we're trying to identify priorities for the association, so that it sounds like we're been a support rather than a lead, and can continue to be a support rather than an attack. So we do that changes from that. In my mind, it changes it from an organizational priority to kind of standard operations.
Did the previous legislation that Fullerton was sponsoring, did it outline specific numbers coming off the waiting list in years to come?
Something else I have to report back on.
I don't think it did either, Dan.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why if they're gonna, when this is gonna expire, time and attention has to be given to the division and what they're going to do, and what their reasonable pace is, and what they're gonna do with the people on the funds waiting list, and the expectations of those on the waiting list to continue to receive services.
Isn't that part of the bill that Tom Cullerton floated out at the end of the session
Well,
to
I
deal
think
with
that's
that?
what we just said, but I don't think that's numbers.
Tom
I
Cullerton.
don't feel like it did either. I felt like I would have been more excited about it, so I wasn't sure what the intention was.
I think it's more about just
Making a
on
statement.
down.
Making a statement. Okay, so definitely Ligas is a tool, for us, but, do we want to spend some time crafting what our recommendation would be, and not now, but would an outcome be to define what reasonable pace would be to keep that waiting list moving? Jane's shaking her head. I mean, is that, and I think that we do have to do everything that we can to support the attorneys and with the non-compliance finding, but I don't, and unless there's something else that we can do that we're not already doing, I don't know, with it being in the court system and in the attorney's hands, I don't know what else we can do.
All of that supports it being above the line and getting some time and attention.
I think with that, I want to echo something that Patty said earlier, is that the fact that with Liggett, there was a lot of new resources that allowed us to bring people in at higher rates into our solos and that type of thing. But the day programming being held flat is really having a negative impact on all the stuff we're trying to do with employment first and innovative and flexible day programs. And so we need to start pushing on that really as part of that conversation.
I had a conversation with one of the interveners who said that the only leverage that we have in terms of adjustments to, and I apologize, I can't remember if it was general rates or whether it was the $15 an hour proposal, but we have leverage now that we won't have once Liggett expires. True. And so, if anything, I think that we need to be rallying around that issue with the interveners, making sure that to the extent that that's something that they're taking a position on, that if they need a louder voice from all of us as the providers, that we're part of that, because the clock is ticking. And once it goes away, not that we'll be successful in accomplishing the leverage we have now with one.
Well, and I think and maybe everybody in the room knows this, and I don't, but when technically does it expire? Because once we define reasonable pace, and they have to continue to be held to that reasonable pace year after year after year, does it expire, or is there an expiration date, but then the legacy lives on? I don't know the answer.
Well, I would hope the court monitoring could and would want all of us to know what that date is and what that definition is and what comes after that last date in the.
Could the court monitor?
Isn't it a 9-year plan?
Yes. And I thought it was at least written somewhere that it was 500 people per year was kind of the reasonable pace, but I don't know if that was proposed or not.
Until that 9 years, after the 9 years,
year-over-year
there's not
requirements that
defined.
I don't think are in place.
I thought it was after 5 is reasonably safe.
Yes.
So whatever that
years.
means.
6 years starts
Kind of like
reasonable pace.
still 4 more years, right?
I also have a question, just naive or dumb, I'm not sure, but if they're out of compliance, is it allowed to expire?
I don't think it's going to ever expire. That's my read, but I'm not an attorney.
The former cases that we had, at some point in time, they went back in and ultimately dismissed them. So, I mean, I can remember 2 different cases where that was what happened. So, yeah, eventually they're allowed to expire.
There are a bunch of active consent decrees still from the 80s
Right.
on that will never go away.
So perhaps an outcome here could be to maybe have Ronnie Cohen come in to this group and walk through some of those questions that we have. I think that will help us frame what we want to do in this area too. Employment first and civil rule modifications, I believe that we said, we talked it through and, kind of fall under that greater umbrella of HCBS. Still a provider tax.
Of course you don't, but it's a revenue source.
So,
Everybody know what that is.
Tell me why I want this.
Everybody know what that is. Does everybody remember? We did an internal project back in 2010 where we looked at healthcare assessments on providers across the country, tried to generate some thinking about whether or not that's something we could pursue. It's basically similar. It can be similar to the ICFDD tax, 5.5% or whatever the feds allow of gross receipts in your residential settings, and you can get that churn matched by the Medicaid and spread it back out. It's not something that there's only 2 states that I think are doing it, but it's been something that some national groups like ACRE and others have explored with CMS before and had a really lot of good traction on it. The healthcare law passed, Obamacare passed, and sort of it's something that's still being talked about. We put that on there, and what the Behavioral Health Committee is discussing next door, I hope, an MCO assessment, which is the same kind of an approach, and also a healthcare claims assessment, because I think it's nice to have a very clear approach for alternative revenue sources besides the state and the Medicaid dollar. We have not pushed this provider tax, but we got approval back in 2010 from the board to engage with state agencies on discussions about this. When HMA put together, the 1115, everything in the kitchen sink proposal for the Clinton administration, this was something that was included in it. This administration has their OMB staff and their policy staff have flat out told me and others within staff that the governor's office looks favorably on ways to try to bring in additional federal dollars. And this is a way that could do that. It taxes you, but it also potentially puts revenue back into your pockets. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I guess what I'm hoping this committee can be open to, and this would be one I guess I would say is a strategy more so than a priority, is to continue to give us the flexibility to have those conversations.
As long as this time around, you put in the proviso that we don't have to pay the tax until we've been paid.
But it would be, there's model legislation, Greg, that's it.
Right.
So I'm gonna say, because in Nebraska, they're not gonna get it all back, they just sue the state and get it.
That's my concern, Nancy. I think
Yeah,
that's-
so we paid it in and we never got it back.
Because I feel absolutely zero benefit with the ICFP.
I wonder, has anybody
Well, it
really
went into
looked
your
at
rate once
that?
upon a time.
Yeah.
But I wonder if anybody's looked at it over the long haul, like what we've paid out as opposed to what we got. I mean, does that data exist?
Yeah.
It does.
It's
And is it
aggregate,
proven
it's
it
not. I mean,
to
I'm sure we could
be-
FOIA if we had to and get it. I don't know.
I just
We
wonder if
probably
it's
do
proven to
that
be
if
in our
that's
favor.
something that I think is important for us to do.
I don't know.
It's like the hospitals too, isn't it?
There's is
some
way
winners,
more complex,
but
but
there's some winners and there's some losers in here. But it's all set up the same way, right?
there are different ways of approaching the tax. They're easy and then there are more complicated ones. The hospital ones are more complicated.
But are there losers and winners?
Yes,
or
yeah, there
there
cannot, yes.
Okay, that's what, just so everybody knows.
Not everybody will get back what they put in. But because this is all Medicaid, that smooths it out more.
But before we do that, we've got to do something again with that day rate. We're gonna keep putting in the SILA and keep the day rate down. Can't work, so.
So perhaps it is what Josh suggested, is that it's maybe more of a strategy, something to kind of keep noodling around as scenarios change and move forward, but I don't think anybody's endorsing it as a let's go do it. It would be something that we would want this to come back here and talk it through. OIG and DDD process. So we had some activity going on in that area. I feel like we had, and I'm kind of looking at Art through the, back there, because I think that there was a subcommittee that was already put in place on this topic. Are there specific outcomes on it that come to the top of your head that you had already established?
Yeah, we had talked about it, and I think that I kind of dropped out. I think Roxy was kind of taking the lead there for a while, but I would tell you, in my opinion, OIG's gotten worse in the last 6 months. Maybe you know or don't know, but they've been reopening all kinds of previous deaths and going back through the files. And I think that they still need to be fixed in a major way. So I think maybe we have to reinvigorate that effort. Maybe that's the outcome, is to go back to the drawing board and say, what are the 5 things that we really are after? Because remember, some of them had to do with changing the definition of mental abuse. There were several things that just still don't make any sense.
Yeah, we authored a bill to get at some of those things that the work group had put together, moved it forward with a respectable sponsor. And he brought the groups together, and it's basically a scare was put into OIG, as I would characterize it. And because of the approach we were directed to take with substantive bills last year with respect to the budget issues, we got that bill to a point, and then we set it aside once we thought OIG got the message in terms of a legislator that wanted to fix things too. And so Roxy had been having some I think the last report I saw was that they were staffing up and that was going to make life better.
They stepped up. They did step up.
Has there been any, Art, given what you said, has there been any measurable improvements to the processes and the timeframes for closing out cases?
Well, what they did do is they are reporting now, whenever you've got cases, how far out they are and where they're at, they are reporting that to the individual agencies. That was another result that came out of that.
So the cases are getting closed sooner, but I don't know if it's really changed the process per se. Improved it.
I feel like for a period of time, after some initial discussion had started with OIG, that there seemed to be a better understanding of the role of nursing in SILA and medical supports that's available in SILA. I feel like that has been lost again. We've had a couple of instances where, you know, recommendations have come back that are completely and totally unreasonable, and we stand there saying, do they even know what we do here? Why isn't your director of nursing accompanying a person to a doctor's appointment? Okay.
I'd like to recommend we just go back to the drawing board and flesh it out and, you know, come back with a recommendation. You know, I guess that's to the board is to, I just think we have to re-examine what that current status is.
Unacceptable? All right, now we're to the line. So what do we do below the line?
So we've still got a little bit more work to do and we're out of time. That's okay. Where we started on this below the line was we wanted to give people the opportunity if they thought, you know, below the line. Basically, how we looked at it coming in is it was below the line. We weren't going to engineer efforts and put resources towards addressing them. And that's a bit harsh, but we have to consider our bandwidth internally, and we have to consider the priorities that are set by the board through this conversation. Is something we have to consider when we're considering people that are leaving us for other shores and how we staff the issues moving forward, right? So, you know, I guess this would be an opportunity if you see something below that line. If you see something below that line, let's have a conversation why I shouldn't have allowed it and what should be an outcome for it. Because each of those items listed there are things we've put some work in the last few years.
Well, and it's not like a 1% or 2%, you know, I mean, they're, you know, between 15 and 23%, so there's clearly some interest, but, you know, if it is sort of a, you know, of course, you can't be everywhere all the time doing everything.
Well, we
but
could,
I would, well, true. But my gut is that most of these items, if there's work groups happening, there's probably someone in this room is probably on these work groups or having these discussions, you know, like with, you know, state use mandate deal. I mean, that's something that I know that's talked about in the Employment First Task Force, and you know, you're there. Home-based services, there's a whole bunch of us that's, you know, focus on that topic.
And not maybe the way, to me, it wasn't an issue of transparency. There's multitude of issues that are tied to it from my perspective, including the fact that if we are in the course we're on, there'll be more people at home-based services than 24-hour services. One of the things I'm concerned about is just that trend factor, and I would like to see that addressed. I mean, I was told by someone who is in a responsible position that obviously they're going to push people in home-based services out of legal because it saves them a hell of a lot of money. So I have that concern about home-based services apart from home-based services, allowing the DD to say that's our priorities, but people in home-based services. But in my mind, I don't know how hard it has to come up, and you know, but we can't turn our back on that.
So that's my concern just about the things below the line. While I get the issue of staff resources, I guess I would like to be able to rely on the association for, and maybe not kind of leading an outcome, but to be, you know, knowledgeable and kind of on the forefront of kind of where are these things going. And maybe it's not an outcome, and maybe it's not the highest priority, but to think that there will be nothing committed to that, those things below the line is a big concern.
I have a concern about the accreditation of boards. I don't think it has to be a huge amount of effort, but there ought to be a way, if they're going to change the rule, to smooth it out so that people get it next time they go through accreditation. I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to achieve that.
We
And the
have,
resources.
so this is an odd one, I think that's an odd one, I think we already have board direction on that. We're boxed in on that.
So are we working on that, right,
Yes.
to smooth that transition?
So what are you working on? I can't remember what the board direction was.
The board directive was to remove the accreditation requirement. So there's two possible avenues that can be pursued. One can be to move legislation as quickly as possible during veto. The other possible avenue is to pursue going through, the top down, the administration, a request for them when they do their internal rules reviews to see that as an unnecessary mandate, one that's not supported by current practices, reimbursement, et cetera, and remove it internally through their administrative process.
If that's not successful, I don't think it'll go there. I think they're pushing that. I think they want to get rid of the big contracts that they can. That's my feeling. And if you can't get those through, at least give it some time.
Well, that's my concern.
Yes.
Is so while we wait, the clock is ticking and the clock is pretty.
I've heard from members that even if they started right now, they would be able to be accredited by that point in time.
I thought that was based in federal rule, that the state was mandated by federal rule. Is that not the case?
I think they do have some legal opinions that it should be accredited. I don't know what they are, but I think.
Well, the reason, whatever the ulterior other motive may have been, what the reason that was given by the administration was, this is a current rule. You have a new administration with a new legal team and new legal interpretations that have said we can no longer continue under administrative moratorium because it contradicts what's currently in our rule. I don't necessarily believe that it is an intention of them to reduce the number of contractors, because there has been a number of formal publications that have been put out. One of them was their comments on WIOA, where they talked about the number and adequacy of the contracts and the people served. And they basically said, we are good with the number of people we have working with us right now, contractors and people served. I think this was more of anything than a legal interpretation of a new legal team and them trying to be accounted for in compliance with their own rules.
I just wanted to say one more thing. Art was just saying earlier about the home base. We should really keep an eye on this, because I think the department, that's the future of our organizations. And I think the department likes it because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be cheaper. And that's my concern, is watch the rates in that home base several close.
I don't know if this has been another, the rates and all these changes and the day training, if there's been other conversations about doing individual rates tied to, like they do SILA, tie it to their ICAP score. Has that been a conversation anywhere?
So
With like DT rates?
Yeah, so what I mentioned earlier, this work group that's working on redefining employment-related services and rates, it's being built off of what's going to require an acuity scale. And there's going to be, at least the way it's proposed right now, and it's still being drafted, waiting for the new reiteration from subject matter expert. There's going to be some mechanism that ties the amount of funding that you get to the needs of the individual. Don't know exactly what that's going to be. Heard concerns about tying those rates to anything like ICAP, because it's not intended to set rates. But some acuity scale that's going to be built. I don't know how they're going to get that done before they do the waiver renewal next year. I don't know how they're going to keep it cost neutral. Really just got to wait to see what the subject matter expert puts out next time around.
Okay, so the next 5 minutes, looking at the items that we talked about above the line, we do need to spend some time kind of ranking what's most important, to least important, or maybe like the top 3, and maybe, so, yeah.
So this is what I wrote down based on what I tracked from the conversation. In terms of the outcomes for the ones we spent some time on. $15 an hour DSP wage. as the outcome and the priority. Put together our own HCBS transition plan using the quotation because that can be a big project. Requesting DRS to identify a 30-day plan for, help me wordsmith this, Cyrus, a plan for providing services consistent with RIO requirements. Okay. Define, for LIGIS, define what a reasonable pace is, as well as being a supporting role for its continuation. For the personal needs allowance, pass the bill. With respect to the Department of Labor white collar exemption, continue to pursue passage of the federal bill. For the Office of Inspector General, bring the group back together to re-examine the previous recommendations. And that's when I had to get up and check my phone.
Okay. No?
Oh, and there was one other one Sheila said, for items below the line, continue to be engaged and knowledgeable in reporting information back to the field.
And then did you move the home-based services back up or no?
Oh, thank you. That
And
was one
I think home-based services is, I mean, that's all part of the home and community-based way we're living, right? And that definitely.
Is there a tension with that one on the difference between when a family selects a provider and when they're doing the services themselves? Okay.
At the time, this issue.
A very, very spirited conversation.
I think it's a big deal too, because I think that there are conversations going on about changing service facilitation and roles and methods, and I don't know that we are, I know I'm not a part of any of those conversations, and nothing that I've seen forthcoming, and there are a lot of service facilitation agencies in our area that are just stopping all intake because they've been told that, they're worried about the growth of the program, employing the people, drawing families in. I think it has to stay above the line because there's so much going on.
Any other thoughts? We got through the list pretty well, I think. I want to say thanks to Cyrus for hassling him up here, but you've done an incredible job. Partnering is not the right word with DRS, but working with DRS and keeping, their feet to the fire on so many issues. So I know that from the time that you started at IARF, you really hit the ground running and have become, the expert on all of those employment issues as well as a variety of others. So, I think I speak for everyone in saying we'll miss you, but we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
I want to add to the uncomfortable love fest because I know from where I'm at in terms of trying to administer on issues, I relied on the employment stuff, and I felt comfortable doing that because none of you called and said, "My God, what the hell is Cyrus doing?" So that's usually a pretty good marker, and I will miss him greatly. He has done an excellent job. These damn millennials, you can't keep them apparently, but I know he'll do a great job going on to where he's at next. So, and I frankly, I take some pleasure is not the right word. That just sounds weird. I'm excited about where he's going because I see where this state is going with respect to managed care, and I hopefully he leaves as a friend unless you guys took it seriously and gave him too much shit today. So I think that's going to be a good thing. It's going to be nice to have somebody within that organization that understands the experiences of Virginia, especially in that environment. So, and I also would say in the internal circulated memo we sent to staff here at the firm, when it came to DRS, I think we may have mentioned something to the effect he's single-handedly saved DRS from starting its own dumpster fire many times. We didn't think that was appropriate to send out to the field. So.
Thank you very much, Josh. Thanks everyone else for all the support you've given me over the years. It's been a great place to work. It's hard to leave the field that I've come to love so much, and all the people I work with, all of you and everyone at the firm. I know I've come a long way, and I know it's all due to the support that all of you provided me. It's kind of, I was trying to think of a funny story to just kind of encapsulate where I started and where I came. And I know that, I remember October 2011, our first conference, we had a board meeting and I was asked to speak about one of the federal legislations that was looking to do away with 14C. And gosh, at that point I was still new and I was so nervous I couldn't continue what I was trying to say to the board, Josh had to step up and finish speaking for me. I was like, ooh, but nobody put me down. Nobody snickered. Everyone was supportive. It was really great. And in time, I came to the point where I started cutting off Carl during board trying to continue my point. And that's just, all of you really helped me in just growing professionally, improving my confidence, and I couldn't thank you enough for it. I really do appreciate it.
You were damn good at it, because Carl used to be 6'2".
Appreciate this.
I don't know.
Hit the road. See you later. She's been but it used to take part. They kind of think she is
So maybe something on the other side of the screen. The boys just have really. We're just smarter as grandparents. Yeah, you can get out.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you.
I don't split lunch.
Oh, I'm really thank Oh, yeah, it's a lot more than here.
Well, I didn't want to adjust
That'd be nice.